He's the Dow Dow guy.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be called the Yin Yang. Now it's just called the Dow Dow logo. Hello and welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast on the Cosmos from independent validator teams. And this week we've got Mag and Barry from Skip Protocol with us, and we're going to talk about MEV. We're going to talk about what Skip Protocol is, and I'm going to, I guess, repeatedly expose my ignorance during the process. I imagine Schultzy already knows exactly what's going on here.
So the same thing.
And it's going to look really clever. So we can have a nice contrast going on. I think we're on opposite sides of the screen as well, so it'll be easy for the viewers to spot who's clueless and who's not. I don't know if that means actually, especially because I think you're above Skip and you're above the Skip folks, so it really is that side of the screen. Although that does bundle Usurper in with my cluelessness, which is definitely not the case. Happy days. So do we want to do a quick bit of news before we get on to talking about Skip? What's the news this week? The news I know about this week is Quicksilver Genesis is delayed. Nulla's finally watched Heat.
Oh, I want to hear about that.
Well, I mean, I suffered through Heat.
Oh,
What?
It was 3 hours long, man. Come on, fucking hell! I don't have that type of time.
We've had some discuss. We've already had people on Twitter asking if you had seen Heat by this episode. So we are at this point a film podcast. That is just.
It took literally an entire day, maybe even more than an entire day to watch it, because I had to watch it in like 30-minute goes. And like, I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like it might have been a great movie. Like,
why did you watch it in chunks? Why didn't you just sit down?
Because
crack a beer.
Man, there's stuff that I need to do. I can't just sit down for 3 hours and watch a movie.
Why? Like, I get that it's hard, but like once a week I can make time to watch a movie, and I'm busy, right? But you just put it on, or you can even get your laptop out and do a little wiggly while you know.
Maybe it's that it was that fucking boring that I just couldn't concentrate on it.
I knew that was coming.
Usurpers.
So where does this rank in our Game of Nodes movie reviews versus the only other movie we've actually talked about, which is Master and Commander?
Oh, I think Master and Commander is better. No, I mean, look, I couldn't give it a good go. I couldn't get into it because I had other stuff on my mind. So I'll try and watch it again. Maybe it'd be better the second time around. I'm really not giving it the go it deserves, I think.
You guys
right? Okay. Well, I was just thinking there was very little drama per second this week in the Cosmos, and Null has just laid straight into Michael Mann's masterpiece. So
I'm literally speechless.
Look, I don't want to lose delegations because I'm hating on this movie so hard. So
please delegate.
I'll give it another go. Like, I feel like people really like it, but I don't know.
Maybe next week you could shit on the Shawshank Redemption or something else, or Casino, or Godfather or something.
Yeah, that'd be nice and popular.
That would be good. You should do that.
I mean, I'll take a pot shot at The Godfather 2. The Godfather 2 is, everybody's like, oh, it's the only sequel that's better than the original. Like, fuck it is. It's shit compared to The Godfather. That's Godfather.
That's a reasonable argument, right? That you can make a case for either of those.
Godfather is God, brackets open, father tier, right? Just A++ or S+, right?
Right.
You'd airlift that shit straight back to mother base, and then your science stats go up. Happy days. Big boss is happy.
All right, I just want to point out that we are already completely fucking derailed. So let's.
This was follow up. You had a shit on.
I mean, this is the problem.
Shit on Heat.
You had a shit on it.
This is the problem. The follow up gets us so off track that by 60 minutes we still haven't talked about the thing that we've come to talk about.
Okay. Fair point. So let's just quickly deal with
on movie reviews. Definitely up our wheelhouse.
I mean, Skip folks, lads, Heat. Talk to us. What do you think of Heat?
I probably haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it. I have seen Master and Commander, though. And if Heat is not as good as Master and Commander,
that doesn't say much in its favor. But I don't know if I trust Null. But
So that's
I was a
both.
big Master and Commander guy.
That both shit on Heat and Master and Commander in one comment. I can appreciate that comment.
This is the Cosmos community here, Barry. That's right.
Nice.
So yeah, okay, shots fired. That's a good start. We could, yeah. I mean, I think as you said, we need to just go shit on a bunch of beloved film properties. Get ourselves fully exiled from the cosmos on the basis of our film taste, and
Right.
Guys, you will get cancelled around here for hating on Master and Commander. Like, it took
Okay,
weeks
I love
of arguing with that. so-
cancelled is strong. I appreciate that some people don't like it as much as me, but it's a
I've never
very
seen
good
it,
film.
so I plead the fifth.
Well, it's a very good film. You should watch Master and Commander. But whatever. Did you've watched Nathan Barley now? No, right?
I've watched
Which one was
some of Nathan Barley. It's pretty hard to stomach as well. Nah, it's good. I do enjoy
Okay,
it.
I don't know that one.
And it's in nice little like 20 to 20
Yeah,
minutes.
it's like
chunks
it's a
for me.
it's a British TV show. So there's like 4 episodes and they're like 5 minutes each, and then
Yeah.
they cancelled it. You know what I mean?
I mean,
It's
maybe
like
it's more
classic.
fun.
It's a
Yeah,
pretty good show though.
It's like distinctly like 2000s. I really,
is.
I quite
Yeah,
enjoy
it really is.
It absolutely is.
We do need a gameofnodes.cock domain. That's what we need.
That's .co.ck.
Oh dear. Right. Okay. Let's.
All right.
Afraid
Okay. So, ha ha ha, very funny. So the only kind of drama that we haven't created ourselves, in fact, it's not even really drama. It's basically just that Quicksilver's Genesis delayed. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think it kind of shows some maturity from the team to actually go, this shit isn't ready yet. We've got some audit stuff we want to do. Let's pause.
Yeah.
They've not given a firm date as well, which I think is really sensible. They're just going to like take their time on that one. So I think it was kind of late when that kind of got called. Like they made the go no go, but I think once they did, they've handled it quite well.
Well, I mean, I think that it's also worth mentioning that they made that statement even after their competitor Stride did like a shadow launch in order to beat them to the punch, right? Acknowledging that their competitor made it to it, and they still saw, hey, we're not quite to the point yet, so let's actually delay. Let's make this statement. Let's make it what we're happening. So I think it's very laudable.
And my memory is shit, but isn't it? I think Stride was announced way after Quicksilver, right? I remember we've been talking about Quicksilver for a long time. It seems like they're just moving extremely quick. Is that right?
Oh yeah, they've been moving very quickly. I only heard about Stride 6 weeks ago, maybe, whereas Quicksilver's been probably 6 months
Or more, yeah.
Which I don't mean that as a talking down on Quicksilver at all.
No.
Just more of how well Stride has been making leaps and bounds. It's pretty impressive.
All right.
Did Stride do some test nets or?
Sorry.
Did Stride, Stride. Do they do some test nets and stuff? Like, I assume you're validating because you validate a lot of chains.
Yeah. They were in testnet. They went to mainnet on Sunday, I want to say.
Okay, this makes a lot more sense to me now because I was a little like I sent the Freya message last night or my last night, and I was like, "Oh, can you get the guys like the Twitter handles from the guys from some network that I like said? Was it Stride, something like that I said?"
It was either Strike or Stride, and I was like, I don't know. I replied with something like, "That's not a network," or "That's a network, not a pro." Well, either way, I dissed you basically.
So
In
this,
the DMs,
Yeah.
just diss Null was like, "You don't even know who our guests are."
there's so many
What he
new
did.
networks coming online, right? That I got a little bit confused, and I thought that it was. That's why, in the pre-show, I was like, "So tell me about this liquid staking," and you're like, "Well, it's
You're
not
like,
liquid."
It's like, well, close, but no, that's completely not what these guys do.
So that's why,
but-
I was like completely confused for like an entire day now. So
Yeah.
now it all makes sense. So the other one is gone live, and it's Stride.
yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that's Stride.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of networks coming online. So I think a lot of people are rushing to live as well at the moment. I don't know
That
why.
seems like
Weird
a
in a bear market, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. In a bear market, this seems like a weird time. Whenever there's not a ton of hype, So people aren't going to just all jump in. So why is now the time to rush to market? I don't
Maybe,
know.
maybe it's competition in like, people just trying to be the first of a particular type of network or something.
That's true. I mean, we have a lot of liquid staking options coming out now. We've got Stake Easies here. We've got what is it, Larry's one, which just launched on
Mars?
Juno. Is Mars liquid staking as well?
Is that not part of the product suite?
What
I
about
don't think
Stater?
so.
So, Mag and Barry, thank God you're not liquid staking, because like,
We ourselves.
yeah, I mean, I think I said this to Frey before. I'm like, why are people making chains that are liquid staking? Like, can't you just? It's a smart contract, right?
It was on Terra. I guess it is in Ethereum. I think there's a lot of reasons people love making chains, though. Like if you can make something into a chain, go for it. I think is the
Yeah,
concept.
but like, my question is though, does it need to be a chain? Because there's a lot of resources that go into like, running a chain in the long term. Like, we're not talking about, oh, this is the fad that we're going to run for the next 20 minutes. It's like people expect that to be online now for like
Decades.
the indefinite future. Like,
Yeah.
that's the expectation when you launch a chain. It's not 5. That's part of the reason like why at King Nodes we don't just jump on every chain, because it's something that you're expected to shoulder the cost of now for like ever. So
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
so go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, we sort of had this conversation internally when everyone was asking us, "Are you making a chain? Are you making a chain?" We still have validators reaching out to us, being like, "I want to validate on Skip Chain." We're like, "We're not a chain. We don't have a token or anything like that." And I think like there is a tough part of building code and investing a lot of time and resources into it, and thinking that it's going to be basically defensible if you don't have a chain, because you have to open source it, obviously. And then like, what's to say that another chain can't just take that, right, and then apply it to their own chain? You want to have some method of capturing value, which Cosmos really is built to do with the whole app chain model. You capture the value for a protocol in the form of your own native token.
I guess this is where the argument becomes stronger for ICS, I guess, because it really is like limiting wasted resources by using ICS for like smaller chains. Like, I guess I feel like not everybody needs a validator set. You know what I mean? Like,
I think our conclusion, we talked about this at quite some length, didn't we? And the conclusion we came to was that it's very easy to get a validator set. It's even actually quite easy to get a validator set that's pretty decent, but the difficulty is basically market cap, being exposed to an economic attack of that type, especially in a bear market. And that's like where ICS, but particularly ICS v2, has potentially like quite a lot of potential. But like the idea that the economic externality is captured is a bit, I don't know if people care about it really.
Can you explain the difference between ICS v1 versus v2? Like what?
So v2
I
is
don't know any difference here.
my understanding is that the v2 roadmap is for layering, so you can, as long as it's compatible, you can layer validator sets from more than one zone that can run the software and the link, the what's it called, the light client thing. So you could, you can basically like get subsets of the validator set for like a stronger guarantee. Like, so you're not just like, for example, like the hub is insanely centralized. There's loads of power in like exchange validators. Nobody wants, well, okay, maybe some people do. If I was starting an app chain and literally that's the thing that potentially Hal will do, there's no fucking way we want the big exchange validators validating if we were running that on ICS, right? That's just, they don't even vote, they don't do shit. They're not good validators, they're just big validators. So layering would allow you to take a subset of the validators that I don't know what the selection method would be. I'm just kind of vaguely aware of this is the intention of the spec, is my understanding. So yeah, somebody smarter than me can probably jump in. Somebody will probably jump in the comments and correct where I've got that wrong. I also want to shout out, we got a comment from Ben Davis just saying that on the app chain model for liquid staking, you can't make a smart contract for liquid staking at the moment. So that's the other reason, for app chains in the space is, if you have native tokens, the Cosmos SDK tokens, then a liquid staking chain makes sense because you're using IBC to then do the hop and do a derivative token rather than doing it on your own chain via Cosmwasm.
Yeah, so actually I hadn't considered that some chains don't actually run Cosmwasm.
There you go. It's the default. It's the default Cosmos stack now.
Yeah, bang it in there. So
there you
Rama
go.
also says
Then says layered. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, he says so V1 is the entire hub set, and he also says that ICS V2 allows the consumer chain to select validators. So yeah, it makes sense.
And how does VP work in that situation? In both those situations? I assume the VP comes across with the same percentage of ownership and everything else associated with that, right? And so if
I would assume that it would just be the aggregate of the selected validators, right?
in what? In the same ratio that they have in terms of
No.
ownership and
Like,
Atom?
well, wouldn't
Would
it
it not
just
be
be the
dynamic?
total of the selected validators, and then they would each have their own percentage of that total?
What percentage?
Whatever their stake is, right? I don't know.
I don't know either.
Maybe
Yeah, so
maybe
let's
research
say-
that.
Let's. I mean, this is purely speculative, but I guess if you've got two chains, let's say Null and Schultz are on chain A, Usurper's on chain B, I do a validator set of the three of you, I would expect the total of your VP combined to be the sum of VP, and then it's a percentage of that, maybe. But then the thing is, they're not equivalent tokens, are they? Because
They're not.
the tokenomics will be radically different on different chains. Like Stargaze has 4 billion, converges on 4 billion supply, and Juno converges on 180 something million supply.
So
those-
definitely gonna have to do some more research on that, because I'm not even sure whether you select the validators and then individually stake that the token of the the guest chain, I guess you would say, to those validators. So maybe it works that way.
But it is. And are those validators running separate binaries for each of those chains that somehow hooks in and uses? Like how?
Hey,
how do they
let's
control
not
that?
write a spec, all right? We got Skip here.
Talk about-
That's fair.
Let's go back to Heat.
If somebody in the comments knows how this works, if you could just write the whole thing as a massive essay in a YouTube comment, so that we can.
And
read
we'll
it.
follow it up next week.
We'll post it up. We'll post it up on the screen. We'll read it out in full. Claim it's our idea. People listening on the podcast later will just think we're really clever, and you'll have helped us out.
No,
cool.
we'll definitely credit you. I think people know that we're dumb shits in certain aspects. So
I don't
Yeah,
think there's
I
any
think
hiding that
fucking
back. Yeah.
secrets out, dude.
in certain aspects.
So-
Secrets out, especially movie reviews out of Australia.
yeah. I mean, it's a shit show, isn't it?
I mean, it's just that Australia makes better movies, so it's hard to stomach these other
You
shit
just-
ones.
Oh my goodness.
Oof.
We've all seen Gallipoli, mate.
I mean, you haven't
It's
even
bloody
watched Two Hands yet.
murder.
You haven't even watched Two Hands yet.
Yeah.
It's on my list to.
Yeah, to be
the
fair,
bottom of the
I
list,
haven't
but it's
watched
on
it
the
yet.
list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you see how I suffer through the things on my list, and you don't even bother. It's the
Yeah,
Yeah, but I've
those-
already
yeah.
watched the only Australian film. I've already watched Gallipoli. We've just been over this.
Yeah, you're suffering through all those U.S. made movies. I agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, sorry. I'm going to stop being mean. I like Australia. Right. Let's kick off. I'm going to completely expose my ignorance. What is MEV? Hello, Skip Protocol. Thank you for coming on the show. You're
Yep.
both looking very lovely.
So
what is
just
what is
before we-
MEV? I'm
hang
an
on.
idiot and I don't understand DeFi. It's been well established on the show.
Hang on.
Sure.
Before we get into that, can I just establish who is Mag and who is Barry? I feel like
I'm-
Barry's got the stash.
No,
Interesting.
Shit.
I will
That's
never.
The stash is a recent development. I don't think it's been a great one, but we're going with it for a while. I'm Mag Barry.
And so Mag is short for something, right? Magnus?
Mag is short for Magnus. Yeah.
Cool. And all right, so you are on the right sides for your name in the little Mag and Barry.
There you go. Make it easy for you.
Super intentional.
Yeah, that was good. All right. So
This is so smooth. I just want
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so also my ignorance on Mev, because I mean I asked before the show and then I told you to stop because you had a really good explanation, and I didn't want you to waste it. So yeah, with no further ado, Explain Mev.
Want to run it back, Barry?
We usually explain it a little differently, so I can try my explanation and then you can give
Sure.
yours. So MEV means minor extractable value, which is sort of a useless broad term, in my opinion. The way to think about it is as a validator in a proof of stake chain or a miner in a proof of work chain, you can, by including particular transactions or excluding others or putting transactions in particular places, especially places relative to other transactions, you can create a block that is more profitable or less profitable for the people transacting on the chain, or more profitable or less profitable for you, the validator, and your stakers. And this comes mostly from DeFi and the fact that different transaction positioning in a block will have different economic consequences for transactions. So if I am a trader and I want to capture an arbitrage opportunity on block, N, and I know it opened up at the end of block N-1, I need to be first. I really want to be first, because if I'm not first, somebody else could get it, the price could move, the opportunity could go away, or my transaction could revert. And so I'm willing to pay, potentially, if I could pay, a lot of money to get that position. And the second position is kind of useless to me, right? It's like it's gone or it's probably gone. And so MEV just refers to kind of like how we construct blocks to be profitable and exploit this fact that some people are willing to pay for particular positioning. Other people don't really care. If it's a governance vote, like it doesn't matter where it is in the block to you. If you're just buying an NFT, you don't care. And MEV is happening today, but I just want to stop there and see if that much made sense. That's like very, very basic.
Barry, does block time have a impact on this? Because like in Ethereum or something else where I might have a 14, 15 second block time, that there's a big gap, right, between when I want to execute versus when it happens. And something like Say or new chains like Aptos, you're talking 600 milliseconds, 800 milliseconds, a second, 0.2. Does that issue go away, or is it just it's high frequency trading, so therefore this issue is always going to exist type of idea?
It's a really good first question. And
sorry.
we're
How about
detail,
which one of you is Mag and which one of you is Barry?
Yes, I'm Barry.
Just dumb it down. Sorry.
Sorry.
I can throw into this one. I've actually worked on the drivers for Intel's networking devices where I was part of a team that sped up one of their network drivers by something like 100th of a millisecond. And Intel was so excited about it that they threw like an offsite party for it because it was that significant. So when we're talking 600 milliseconds, that's basically an eternity.
Yeah.
For the HFT world, that really is eternity, right? So
right.
The people who are submitting and participating in MEV for the most part are highly sophisticated, and they're becoming increasingly sophisticated too. They're coming from name brand HFT firms like Jane Street, et cetera. So 300 milliseconds, 600 milliseconds, 14 seconds, it's all an eternity to them. I think that where it starts to become different on, let's say, a chain that has a 300 millisecond block time versus 14 seconds is you start to whittle down the amount of sophistication you have to participate in those opportunities. But they're there nonetheless. It doesn't affect whether those opportunities exist or not.
Yeah. Can I ask a really stupid question? If you're actually that obsessed with making the most of those opportunities, surely there are even more devious strategies. Like you could, for example, join the validator set, run a full node. You can modify the code such that you can basically always privilege your own, if transactions submitted with this key, this public key, always privilege it. And then you could have, say, like a really low timeout. So you fail out other validator connections so that in the event that you are the proposer, you're basically just going to go, yeah, I'm done. Fuck it. Throw everybody else away as soon as I'm over the minimum threshold. So there are probably avenues for very sophisticated, which I guess we're not seeing yet because nobody is sophisticated enough to compile their own binary and run that as a validator and make sure it will make consensus with the other nodes, right?
Well, so first of all, that's already happening. So you don't have to worry about whether it's too sophisticated. In fact, it's not that. I mean, all validators out there, it's not that hard. Or it's probably less hard than becoming a highly advanced searcher who competes on millisecond timeframes. You could just like modify your mempool and have your own logic there. I mean, you run the risk in the Cosmos community of being detected, if not by anyone else, then by us. And we will understand, and we have understood the validators that are doing this. I think long term, our answer to that is not like, oh, let's, I don't know, like you could try to solve it with governance and say like, okay, these guys are doing, front running. But I think it can be tough to prove. And of course, if you're that devious validator, you're going to deny. I think what makes more sense for us is how do we create a system that's even more profitable for that validator than doing everything themselves. And so that's what Skip does.
So we got a question in the comments from Rama saying, what is good and what is bad MEV, which I think is the question you've just alighted upon, right? Just there, which is good MEV is incentivizing behavior in such a way that it's more profitable for them to do the thing that is not underhand, essentially a minor network attack.
Right.
Versus,
I mean, is it not just taking the underhanded thing and doing it publicly so that the profit can be shared more equitably? Really?
I'd say there are some other differences. So I guess first, like, let's just like talk about what good MEV is and bad MEV from just like a trading strategy perspective, since that's usually the way we use it. So one MEV strategy that you can imagine that is used a lot on Ethereum is sandwich attacking someone on a public DEX. You guys familiar with that? The idea is basically like, I'm a normal user. I want to do a normal swap on some DEX. I set my slipperage tolerance to be something, and I submit my swap out into the mempool. Transaction is unconfirmed. Traders see that transaction sitting there, and they say, oh, okay, I can actually bundle your transaction with one of mine, put mine in front to buy the token before you do, then force your purchase to exhaust your entire slipperage tolerance, and then sell immediately after you do. Basically, like taking any profit you might have had and forcing you to pay a worse execution price, like the worst execution price you can pay. Because I can look at your transaction, I know exactly what that is. And so that's a sandwich tech. We think of that as like bad MEV because it hurts user experience. It gives the user worse execution. Another thing you could do is simpler strategy, you just front run someone. You see that somebody has a trade that is going to be profitable because you can simulate it in advance. Okay, this is going to make money. And so then you just put your transaction ahead of theirs. Or you don't let their transaction execute if you're a validator or if you're someone else who can control the ordering there.
Or you copy another searcher, see them doing a strategy, and you're like, I'm going to do it first, right? Right. That's like a thing we see.
So we think of that as bad MEV as well.
Before you get on to good MEV, so I just wanted to ask, like, specifically in the Cosmos and not just in general, like, how is it possible in the Cosmos to actually control the ordering of transactions? Do you have to be the proposer to be able to do it? Like, do you have to do it on a block that you hit as the proposer?
So for now, yes. You will, yeah, as Rama said, you see this on some DEX chains, and it's really hard to prove that a validator is doing it. But you see things that look very sandwichy or very front running on certain validators more frequently than others. And that's because right now Cosmos has a first come, first serve mempool. So if you don't do any reordering yourself as the proposer, then the way it works is whoever's transaction arrives at the validator's mempool first should be the one that gets in the block first. Cosmos is moving away from that, though. Over time, you're going to see people upgrade to a Tendermint version that has priced gas ordering. So Tendermint will look at the fee and will look at the gas wanted for a transaction and reorder things so that the people who are willing to pay the most per unit gas get at the top of the mempool, top of the block. So then this stuff is going to get a lot more complicated.
Hang on, quick question. I wasn't aware of that change. Again, more fool me. Why is that desirable?
Yeah, I was going to have the same question
Because
because
that
it doesn't
seems
seem
like-
like a better method.
That
It seems like it
like
just opens the door to MEV,
yeah, it
right?
seems like a backward step in terms of integrity of the network, and it also seems like a backward step in terms of my understanding about how partially asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance at a conceptual level is kind of designed. Like the whole point is the block. Well, the whole point is, at least I thought, generally speaking, the idea was you would have an unordered block.
I mean, so it's bad in the way that it opens up the door to a lot of these like bad forms of MEV, and it's also bad in that it's going to look like Ethereum before they had flashbots, which was not the place you wanted to be. Ethereum, when it was just priority gas auctions, was an iterative bidding gas war, right? So all the searchers were there. They found massively profitable transactions. They would bid over each other in tons of failed bids to get to just some winner by the end of the block time. And then everyone else had to suffer because that pushed up the price of gas, that filled up blocks, and you were basically participating in the same place where all of this war was taking place. What Flashbots did was it moved all of that out of the chain. It said, okay, let's have this war take place someplace else so it doesn't have to come up the primary mempool and just submit the winners. And to incentivize people to go over to that, they gave them a lot of really nice things that Skip also offers, which we can get into. But it not having that doesn't remove MEV, right? So if you don't have priority gas auctions, okay, maybe you don't get sandwiching or like atomic sandwiching unless validators do it. But what you do get is potentially something even worse, which is what we already see, which is spam. So because like I can only backrun, because I can only go behind a transaction, then my incentive is, okay, how do I get as close to right behind the transaction as possible? The first option you have, which is not available to most people, is, okay, like maybe I have a validator that works with me that promises that they give me execution, or I run a validator myself. But the second more likely option, because you don't have that, is you just spam the network as much as humanly possible with your transactions to every node, every validator, in hopes that it gets to the right place at the right time so that you're right behind that transaction. So if you guys ever look at, like, let's say an Osmosis or an Evmos block, it's filled with this, right? And this was a huge problem also during Terra, during the DPEG, when there was a lot of MEV activity with Anchor liquidations as Luna was plummeting, UST Luna arbitrage because it was meant to keep its peg. And you saw basically users just spam the hell out of it, searchers spam the hell out of it to try to capture those opportunities. And that is arguably as bad, if not worse, than what would come around from priority mempools.
So in the Terra case, normal people who were trying to repay their anchor loans, because they're like, oh shit, UST is depegging, like I'm going to get liquidated, would try to, and they couldn't get their transactions into the mempool because mempools were so full of searchers arbing UST as it fell and liquidating other anchor loans that people just got wiped out. The TFL like couldn't get their transactions onto the chain. We were at a Terra Jump hosted hacker house, and some pretty senior people from TFL who knew what we were working on came to us and were like, is there any way we could ship like this kind of prioritization right now? Like we can't actually effectively, reliably access the network. And so the way we think about it is like the way you design your mempool, even whether you have a mempool or not, doesn't really affect whether MEV exists. It just sort of affects like the incentives around the strategies people use for how to capture them. And what you want, at least what we think Cosmos is good for Cosmos, is a market that creates strategies that don't harm user experience in the ways that spam can, for example, and does cause some of the profit or most of the profit of these opportunities to be redistributed to communities, to users, to protocols, to stakers, and to validators. And that's kind of what Skip tries to accomplish.
So guys, so the implementation of this is this something that's embedded within the binaries that are coming from the individual chains? Is this something that runs alongside it? Like what's the implementation side of the house?
For Skip,
For Skip.
Okay.
Yeah. So it does run in the binaries. So if you think about it from the searcher perspective, right? So it's like, what do they want, right? And how can you give something that they want in a way that doesn't harm users? So what they want is bundling, right? They want the ability to say, okay, I want a specific execution order between my transaction and somebody else's. Skip doesn't allow for sandwiching and front running type bundles. That's off the table. So what you're left with is back running, which we consider to be basically fine. And I think, there's a strong argument.
So you can still do the same spam attacks that you can currently do, essentially.
No. So if you think about it, so like let's take the case of Osmosis. Right now, like back running spam is a huge problem there. So like all the searchers will see a transaction they want to back run, and because they don't have a way of guaranteeing that they'll be behind it, they'll just spam the network. With Skip, you have a way of guaranteeing that you'll be behind it, because we'll bundle with your transaction with the one that you want to be behind, and then we'll put it at the top of the block. So you have a guaranteed way. And if anyone else spams, like that's just wasted gas for them. There's no reason to, you won't win. It's impossible.
One thing, sorry, not to cut you off, just one thing you might be missing, Frey, is when Magnus is saying you bundle your transaction, you submit it, Skip runs off-chain infrastructure that sits between traders and validators. So when it comes time to propose a block, basically Skip sends the validator the winner of the auction. So we still get spammed, kind of, but we protect validators from that spam by eliminating the on-chain incentive for it. There's no reason for a trader then to go directly to the validator, as Magnus was saying, because somebody who's gone through Skip will already have won the opportunity.
So essentially, the validator is going to run a modified binary that prioritizes the Skip transactions in a particular order, and then lets through regular transactions that say submitted via an RPC. So isn't there a danger then on a high usage network that as a user you're going to experience block timeouts if you're not going through Skip, because you might have a lot of, say, arbitrage action because there's some serious price thing, like Osmosis is talking about doing a stable, maybe they do a stable, maybe in 2 years it depegs. There's a lot of action. All of the action is coming via Skip because everybody is trying to basically take advantage of that. They're prepared to pay the gas to do so. I am an average user. I'm just submitting my transaction to an RPC via a web wallet of some kind. I want to make that, this is obviously a very contrived example because the reality is, even if you missed a block, right, you'd probably hit one shortly after. But it is possible that you could fill it. What the fuck is Null doing? Is it possible that you basically, the in a situation where there is very, very high demand for ordering transactions within blocks, you could end up with very few non-Skip TXs landing in your block?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple ways that we offer chains to solve this. The easiest way is we just cap the size of the Skip. But so basically there's two separate mempools now. There's the regular mempool, and then there's the sidecar mempool, which handles these bundles, right? We cap the size of that sidecar mempool to be, let's say, 30% of the total gas / total bytes available in a block, so that, you basically force there to be space. I think that's one way of doing it. And that's kind of also okay because it basically forces the part that is available to be more competitive. So, maybe you get approximately the same amount of MEV captured anyway. So that's how we have it sort of out of the box. I think the reality is like, if you are in a situation where the block is totally full, right, which basically means the network, it's like if housing is full, right, and like you can't offer any more places, it kind of makes sense to basically implement some kind of ordering system based off of willingness to pay. Right? It's like, should you be included in that case because you were first or because you spammed, or should you be included because you're saying, no, I really want this to go through. I'm willing to pay extra to get it in. That's like a question of like incentives that I think a block should.
Yeah, it's quite a fundamental philosophical question actually when you get down to it, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And does that change? I mean, that's Osmosis, which is an L1, and you have these kind of structures. I know you guys are talking to Juno too. So when you have this idea of like a ton of kind of smart contracts within that structure, how does the smart contract piece fit into that as well? Can you say every transaction for this contract has to go through Skip, or like, because there might be something that's very specific in that type structure, or how is there a? I don't know. I think it's my uneducated question is, how does something like CosmWasm fit into this need?
Yeah. So from Skip's perspective, Skip doesn't care about what's in your transaction or what's not, really. It's all, to us, it looks the same way as it looks to Tendermint, pretty much.
Okay.
It's just all bytes, right? So as long as you're submitting to Skip something that can run on chain against the application state and works in the application state machine, we don't care too much what's in it when we do some checks around making sure we don't have bad MEV. But CosmWasm or transactions that just interact with ordinary modules, it doesn't really matter, at least on the technical side of it. What's interesting is some chains who we've spoken to actually want to have a sort of tighter coupling between Skip and the logic of their application. So they want to ensure that actually there's a Skip bundle at the start of every block, and that all the validators agree on it and have some new Skip signing, that kind of thing, which is not our default. And it's not something we're shipping to the big ecosystem chains like Juno and so forth. But it's kind of an interesting idea. And on the smart contract side, I think like the most significant thing about smart contracts for MEV is it just opens up a lot of new opportunities and also new attack vectors. Smart contract authors need to think about, okay, what could happen if somebody is able to like interact with other smart contracts in a way that allows them to run multiple transactions against my contract in a particular chain or in a particular block, excuse me. That's an attack vector that has been exploited a lot of times on Ethereum to do various, flash loan governance attacks, which can be quite scary. Flash loans are coming to Cosmos, so that's something people need to think about. But for the most part, we don't really care if it's the chain or a smart contract. It's just about whether it's a transaction.
It's just transactions and messages, no matter where they come from.
Yeah.
So, all right. Sorry, something you just mentioned there was no, I just had a thought while you were towards the end of that. So something you mentioned there was flash loans and governance, and I was wondering if that's actually possible in Cosmos as well, because you have to be the holder of your tokens at the end of the vote, right? In Cosmos. I just wanted to confirm if that's actually possible in Cosmos or not. I don't think it is, right? Governance flash loan attack.
I think it depends how the smart contract is constructed. So we're talking less about governance on, let's say, like general protocol, like Osmosis governance, and we're talking more about let's say, so a good example is Beanstalk, right, which was exploited for some $650 million in a fraction of a second. And the way that happened was they borrowed $1 billion or something like that. They used that to buy the native token. They voted on one of their own proposals within that protocol as a smart contract to send themselves the entire treasury. It got sent, and then they repaid the loan, and they just ended up with some $650 million.
Yeah, it was just So I guess that's kind of possible, say in the sense of like DAO, because the way DAO works is that you have to have the tokens staked. Well, actually, it wouldn't work there because there's an unstaking period. So
it's this custom voting module, null in DAO version 1. So it actually does depend on what the exact mechanism is. But yeah, you could attack a DAO and drain its treasury that way, depending on how its voting module works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but this is independent of MEV, right? So it's like currently in a transaction, you can bundle messages, right? So you could have a message that takes out a flash loan and a message that executes some governance, and then a message that repays the flash loan, and that would be atomic. The simple way to fix that, and I hope DAO is doing something like this, is you basically require a 1 block delay between sort of when the vote executes and the beginning. So you can't have a multi block flash loan. That's an impossibility.
Just noting that down for Jake.
In general, like most Cosmos, because you've had like governance as a core part of the app chain thesis from the beginning, like most smart contract authors and most chain devs in Cosmos are like pretty sophisticated on these kinds of things. And also we've seen so many attacks in Ethereum now that people are readily defending against, that in Cosmos is set up well to avoid them. But as Magnus said, that's less about like MEV in the sense of like Skip bundling or someone else doing bundling, and more about MEV in the sense of like, okay, how much profit can you make by either including a transaction or not including it? And are there crazy things you can do with that?
If it can be exploited, it will be exploited, is unfortunately, I think, the reality.
I saw Jay come out with I think it was tweet today maybe from Say talking about not having validator commissions and really making it. I think this is, and I wasn't sure if I think you guys are working with them. I'm not sure if this is related to Skip or not, but they were talking about having a MEV structure within Say that would basically be a commission share through the MEV commissions that would come back to the validator set versus the actual commission structure kind of built within the Tendermint. Is that through you guys? And you guys want to talk about that a little bit, or what's the? I just saw it like literally like a half an hour before we started, so just curious on how that works.
Yeah, we can't comment fully on what's going on.
Theoretically.
But theoretically, I mean, that's sort of part of our thesis, right? So our like mission as Skip is to make every chain, every blockchain financially sustainable. And what we've seen over time is the different ways that have been approached, and this is early days, and we're experimenting different approaches with gas fees, with basically just minting tokens out of thin air. That's not sustainable, and the gas fees sort of harm user experience. So what we've realized is, hold on a second, like especially on Cosmos chains, but also true for larger L1s, there's this incredible opportunity for the protocol itself to capture its own MEV and to distribute it back to the stakers and maybe even the core protocol team, liquidity providers, validators, everyone who is important for the actual chain to run in a way that is sustainable. And so that's sort of become our guiding philosophy, is like, okay, how can we take this force that's normally been used to capture billions of dollars in profit in ways that are not oftentimes distasteful, and build it in a way that makes everyone happy, including the people who are capturing it. And we've decided or what we have right now as an option is like the best way to do that. So for example, if there is a transaction on chain that, let's say you're a whale and you buy 1 million Juno, right, a huge amount of Juno, that's going to meaningfully tip the price, let's say on Osmosis, if you're doing it there, against all the other pools, to the point that there might be an arbitrage opportunity clearly worth like $200,000, right? So today what happens is everyone spams and one person wins, and that person gets all of the money, the entire $200,000. The post-Skip, or sort of how Skip comes in, is there's an actual auction for that place. So someone says, hey, I want to bundle with this and I'm willing to pay $1,000. Someone says, well, that's a really lucrative opportunity. I'm willing to pay $10,000. And then you have a bid up until the auction's closed and block time's over. And then the person who paid the most, which we would hopefully expect to be around, close to the actual value of the arbitrage, maybe $180,000, that would get straight to stakers and the validators. So that's sort of like how we imagine distribution and chains to capture their protocol revenue in the future in a sustainable way.
So stepping back, like today, when you have an APR and you have like you said before, Mac, like you have a minting of rewards that's going out, there could be 0 transactions in these blocks, but nevertheless we're minting, right? Because so we have a kind of a fixed APR structure and those types of things. I guess what I'm hearing is if the time doesn't matter, and that's really a dependence of time, right? Meaning like over a period of time, we have so many blocks that get minted, therefore this is how much rewards we get, and we have a validator structure with VP, and it gets stuck out, right? And so therefore there's whatever. So whether or not the chain is successful or not, meaning is anybody actually using it, is anything actually happening, that minting occurs, APR happens, etc. I think what I'm hearing here is that structure depends on number one, the transaction size, maybe in some situations, and also the number of transactions that go in there, regardless of the number of blocks that occur, right? So a blockchain that has more transactions would be more valuable to a validator. The blockchain that has less users and less transactions would be less valuable to a validator or anybody else, right, associated to that that's receiving MEV output. Is that right? Like, so meaning like I'm taking the commission based on the actual work performed, meaning the number of transactions, the size of those transactions, what people are willing to pay to be able to transaction in a specific spot versus just time.
I think that's a good way to think about it at a high level. The way I'd put it is MEV. So like if you just like back up, block rewards are designed as a way to solve the cold start problem that chains face, right? Where they start with nothing, no activity, no validators, and they need to give tokens away for free, basically in the hope that eventually the chain will have valuable activity on it. And the idea is always, the block rewards will go down and the transaction fees will go up such that it's still worth your time as a validator to be validating on the network. Yeah. That's always sort of been the plan, right? And like where MEV comes in is if you just do something like make everybody pay the same fee, it's not going to work. Just in general, like you're not pricing your resources well. You should price your resources relative to what people are willing to pay for them so that the validators and the stakers and the chain is making as much money as possible there off those fees. So the way to think about MEV is like, it's just like, and the skip auction is it's a way that we're making sure we're pricing block space well. We're pricing it such that it maximizes revenue for the chain. And that's where the financial sustainability stuff comes from. Like now it becomes possible to potentially have a chain that doesn't require block rewards in, several years or whatever it may be, because we're actually like making sure that the traders who are using it are paying a lot for their sophisticated strategies, and retail users don't have to pay as much as a result.
Or anything.
Yeah, it's kind of like Robinhood, they have payment for order flow, and all of these brokers do payment for order flow now, and that's a shitty system because it's like private and like it's basically just Citadel that buys all the order flow. MEV, the skip auction, is an alternative to that. It's like the future of that, where we auction every single order. We do it in a public, auditable manner. The results get committed on chain, and the rebates of the auction go back to the community that actually creates them.
It's the same desired output. The way that we get there is obviously very different, right? But the same desired output in terms of that people are like there's an auction to be able to pay for that placement and be able to build a market around that placement. The same thing that happens privately, except it's just not in the open, right? And here I think you're trying to be able to find something that allows that to be. It's one of the benefits of the blockchain.
Right.
So if I can then jump in and say, this is really interesting, obviously, and the idea that fees are like completely unsustainable at the end of most chains' tokenomics is, I don't think, controversial to anybody that's really looked at the tail end of most chains' tokenomics and gone, unless this token's $1,000, that's not going to sustain R5A 2XLs. Let's put it that way. So what's the time frame on Skip having sort of something that is sort of runnable on a main net? You're going to say like, oh, it's already live, and then I'll look stupid again for like the 15th time this episode.
It's actually Stride. Not joking. But no. So our time frame, we have tried to accelerate it as much as we can. What we're building is very difficult. It's not like building a protocol or a smart contract or anything like that. We're fundamentally altering consensus, which has, of course, huge implications, right? If you're a validator that works with us and we screw it up, right, it has potentially bad consequences in the form.
Well, but this is pre-consensus, right? This is the creation of the block before the pre-commit, right?
It is, but of course it involves the same code base, right? So we ship a modified version of Tendermint called Mev Tendermint, which, since you're just in that code base is highly sensitive.
Right. Okay. So yeah, if there's something that changes within consensus that then has any problem with it, it's going to add additional attack vectors for the entire of your application.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's two parts to what we're building. The first thing is what we call Mev Tendermint, sort of a riff off of Mev Geth, which we took a lot of inspiration from, which is the Flashbots version of Geth that 85% of hash power uses, which allows for capture of MEV. So that's one part, and that's pretty much finished. The other part of it is the auction system. So this is something that happens off chain to sort of preserve privacy. And I can sort of get into why and how we still maintain audits on it so that it's, verifiable. But that part of it is very complicated because it involves a tremendous amount of simulation. So one thing that we offer back to searchers is that, and for anyone who uses the Skip Sentinel, which is this auction system, is if your transaction would fail, we give you all your gas back. No gas is taken. So full gas refunds on any transaction. That's something that Cosmos doesn't have. So basically, let's say if you're submitting in a very competitive auction and then you submit, $20,000 worth of fees for something, but you just lose out to someone who paid, let's say, $21,000, you don't want those fees getting burned. So it's absolutely vital for us to basically be able to simulate and say, okay, you both have valid bundles ahead of time without consensus finishing, but this one won, and sorry, you didn't win, but here's all of your fees back. We didn't take anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Right.
therefore,
So that needs to be an incredibly high performance piece of code, right?
Yes, it's highly distributed, and it even has to work at the level of, let's say, right? So 300 milliseconds to run that auction. Barry and I both have backgrounds in the financial system. Barry worked at D.E. Shaw. I worked at Bridgewater for a brief period of time. And, sort of we understand like the requirements there. So in terms of like development, we are, I would say, maybe a week or two away from actually being able to ship onto testnet for a couple different chains. And then after that, probably depending on how that goes, it's probably going to be another 2 months, I would say, until like it can start going to mainnet. Some key things to note is Mev Tendermint is going to be fully open source. So basically we've already, are in collaboration with Interchain and Informal in terms of like passing it by them as a first pair of eyes. But one thing we do with all the validators that work with us is we're going to do like massive code reviews where we all go through it and talk about like potential vectors. And we try to keep it extremely slim so that the changes are like graspable by someone with, I would say, like a moderate level of programming experience. So you can understand like, okay, this is what it's doing. It's not affecting the main attack vectors. It works with all the Horcrux systems. It works with all the KMS systems. It works with all like the Sentry to validator systems. It doesn't have a direct port to a validator ever. So it can't DOS it. And like make sure that everyone feels comfortable with it. And we want that part to be a community effort. And then the auction side of it, basically, like we can publish sort of like how like the auction works, but similar to how Flashbots is, we'll probably keep that closed source for a while to prevent sort of like copycats slapping a token on top of it. By the way, we don't have a token. That's probably how we're going to go. But the auction itself doesn't have any way of communicating with validators except for going through this Mev Tendermint. So as long as that's sound, most of like the scary attack vectors are gone.
And what's the Skip business model there? You guys, I see you're taking a percentage out of that gas fee that comes through those transactions?
Yeah, so we've thought through this a little bit. I mean, our basic idea right now is, we're obviously running expensive infrastructure. Our basic idea is basically asking validators and stakers to share some portion of the additional revenue that we bring them. Okay. So that's not taking a percentage out of, commission or out of like what they would have earned otherwise. It's just of additional revenue. So, some small fee that basically over time will be totally unprofitable for us to have, but maybe over time as Cosmos grows, which we're very bullish on, will become something that can run a sustainable business.
So will you build in a way to make that easy? Like, will you build in a way that they can just like set a percentage to distribute to Skip?
Right.
of their extra revenue that they're capturing?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways to do it. I mean, one way of doing it is modifying, like, let's say the fee distribution module, where basically you say, like, if this came from Skip, like, toss them a couple pennies. I think that we're shying away from that in the short run, just because it involves like large scale changes of the Cosmos SDK, which tends to be more fluid in terms of its changes at the chain level. So it involved like a lot more upgrades, etc. So how we have it now is basically that fee is encoded into the transaction. So it's like if you want to be considered by the Skip auction, you basically send like 5% of the total fee of the additional fee that you want to pay for prioritization to Skip, and therefore it just gets like everything else gets treated normally.
So, what's the alpha on which networks are going to be first? So you say you're going to testnet. Have you already picked which ones those are going to be? Presumably, like the Sei testnet.
Yeah, so we're starting with a couple of chains that are not yet launched, basically for security reasons. So we're still actively working on the code. We want to work with a network that like wants to basically build Skip-in as a primitive, and is willing to iterate with us through their testnet very actively. So, and I can't name the chain or chains yet that's on. But once that's stable, a few more months go by. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be on mainnet for Terra, Juno, Evmos, in addition to those other app chains. We are not deploying on the auction infrastructure on Osmosis, even though there's a lot of arbitrage activity there. We're working with an Osmosis in another format to help them capture their arbitrage as protocol revenue.
Yeah, which I think you can read on Sunny's tweets. Basically, they are opting for a different solution, which we're building, which is equally exciting, I would say, but doesn't use time for rug. No rugs with us. It's using a different solution that I think is going to be equally beneficial to stakers, but basically involves on-chain arbitrage.
This has been a good conversation. This is the most I've thought on a Gaming Nodes conversation in like 6 months.
I guess we didn't really explain our new format at the start of this, did we, Frey? So I guess people probably think we just ended the podcast.
Yeah. So to all those, I'm not sure if this will make it onto podcast.
People still watching, don't leave. We changed the format, so now we actually like have an after show. So if you want to stick around for our general banter, hang around.
whether or not this will make it onto podcast players, I don't know, but certainly on YouTube we're going to stick around for a little bit longer, and maybe just shoot the shit a bit more generally. Before we do that, I did notice some questions come up in that last section, so I'm going to throw them your way, Magnus and Barry.
Is it this one?
Okay. Yeah, we've triggered Rama, so he's gone. RIP. So there are a couple of questions from Ben Davis. So if this works, will chains suddenly appear less busy?
Probably not.
Good.
No, I would think so, right? Because the idea would be that you would have less spamming of transactions because they know that whoever's it doesn't mean that the spammers actually.
I feel like people are always
there'll be the same number of
spam transactions.
Well, but the same number of legitimate transactions, right? But hopefully less spam.
Legitimate, hopefully even more, but less failed spam transactions, which don't help anyone.
Yeah,
right. The other question was, how do you calculate the extra value that Skip has added? I'm assuming the answer is complicated maths.
Yeah, that's basically. For now, it's somewhat simple. So we know that the fee that the we can calculate the fee that the trader's paying us for their bundle. We just sum the transaction fees, right? And we can also calculate how much they would just have to pay to get the transaction to run on the network. And then we can see the difference there. Since mempools are first come, first serve right now, there's no reason you'd pay more in that fee unless you were trying to win the skip auction. And then we use that difference as our baseline and we say, okay, are you also paying us? Like,
Yeah.
Are we getting 5% of that?
So we assume you pay the minimum to get it in. If you pay more than that because you want priority, that's the additional amount, right? Because you're actually paying for priority in that case.
Once there's prioritized mempools, this gets a little bit more complicated. Because then it's like maybe you are also bumping your fees for just like because you want to be at the top of the normal mempool, and then like we have to think about the value that we add in a slightly different way, where it's like the difference between the thing that is paying the least in the mempool and like what you're getting from skip, and so it gets a little
right. Because there'll be would there be a situation where somebody could submit an ordered a bid transaction to the Tendermint mempool that exceeds the amount that you would bid to skip for that position, but then that transaction will be in the tranche of transactions that are not ordered by skip, and so potentially behind transactions that have paid less?
Yes, that's a really good point. So currently we have that tranche system because by definition, the normal transactions don't have fee prioritization. Therefore, they're most likely paying the minimum fee. So anything that's paying above would be in skip if it's anywhere. But after there is sort of this like fee prioritization, then the validator will get to choose, similar to MEV-Guest, say, okay, I want to construct the most profitable. Like, let me see. Okay, first bundle from here looks good. Oh, and this actual regular transaction is super profitable. Let me take that. And then they'll construct the most optimal bundle from there.
Right. So it will have the effect that fees essentially do for the average user who's not trying to do an arbitrage opportunity. Fees as a very baseline level are likely to go up, I think. And in fact, actually, I've just noticed in the chat, I think Rama has said almost exactly the same thing. This implies there's a min gas fee essentially on all vals on the chain, right?
There already is,
which there
without
is
us currently. Right?
Yeah. Well, there should be in Cosmos, but it's optional, right?
It's optional. Sure.
For the chains that you were talking about here in these arbitrage opportunities, I understand why there should be, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like presumably Juno will be one of those chains, and I know for a fact that there's people who don't run fees on Juno so that they can do the bullshit for free. The what is it? The restaking.
Yeah. Auto compounding, you mean?
Auto compounding, yeah, it's fucking stupid. So they're risking, the security of the chain so that they can be more of a degen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's
something you would never do, Noel, right?
No, I've got fees. Fuck yeah, I pay them.
No, but I mean, you would never risk your own business or the chain for the purposes of being a bigger degen. Never.
Not in
self-introspection.
I'm just
no
thinking,
scenarios.
Am I doing that somehow? I don't think so. No. Well, I mean,
minimum fees aren't necessary now because there isn't that much volume. Once there is a lot of volume and people are submitting for free, there's going to be and also like no one's abused it to a large degree. I mean, people have, but like not to the degree that every single block is full. You saw this once on Osmosis. Remember when the guy was submitting that transaction for like, I don't know how many blocks in a row, but just totally filling it up. So you run that risk when you have zero fees of people having zero downside to basically spamming on a chain. So like as soon as things get competitive, fees will come back. Whether or not it's in a fair way, like we're trying to implement it or in a way that's just like validators are just bumping up their fees.
Yeah, I guess.
But the flip side of that is that the app chain model means that we might not get to that point for several years yet because of the way the app chain model works, right? Like more chains will probably rise and literally die than will hit that bottleneck of that scale of usage in Cosmos, which, like, if we're honest, we're all bullish on Cosmos, but it's not as widely used as some other protocols, right?
Sure. Yeah, right, for sure.
Yeah. So
So just on the fees and network spam, right? So this has been a fundamental thing of what we've been talking about through the whole episode is fees and spam. So there's an example the other day on Secret Network where there was just, and Schultz might actually know the contract that was being used, but someone was doing a lot of contract activity and it was completely jacking up the network. And so the reason that the way they ended up stopping that, I think in the end, is that they asked all of the validators to implement a fee if you don't have one, and also smack it up quite high. And I believe that stopped it, did it, Schultz? I think everyone might still have high fee because I'm seeing very low transaction volume on Secret at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it stopped it in the sense that it drained the bot's wallet, and so if they refilled it again, they would once again continue hammering it out.
Yeah, so it became a situation where it was costing virtually nothing to do to very expensive to do. And now, actually, when I look across the misses on the chain, yeah, I mean, the chain's running a lot better right now, actually, with higher fees. I'm assuming there's still higher fees. The validators appear to be missing a lot fewer blocks than is the norm. But anyway, I just thought
these transactions. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just thought that would be an interesting tidbit on the spam and fees.
Well, for Secret, it's a little unique as well in that the reason why that one was so especially bad was the arbitrage bot was built off of a smart contract rather than just setting normal transactions. And so it was just taking up an insane amount of computation space. But my question is, what is this like? What does a transaction look like for Skip for it to be picked up and have a bid? Would someone have to submit a transaction directly to Skip, or would it just use a normal RPC, but in the memo it says Skip offered 100 Osmo or whatever as the fee? What would that look like in real terms?
Yeah. So to participate in the auction, a trader or a normal user, say if they just want top of block execution or privacy or whatever it may be, they submit to an RPC endpoint that we expose. And if they want to be considered by the auction, then they include a send token message in their transaction that sends some amount of tokens to Skip.
And then the fee is treated as the auction, or basically the gas price is treated as like the way that we order things. So it's like if you bump up your fee, but you only use a constant amount of gas, that increases the price of gas, right? Because gas price is the fee divided by the total gas units. And then that's what's used to order them.
Yeah. So the flip of that is, if you send Skip a lot of money, but you don't put your fee for the validator high enough, then you still won't win the auction. It doesn't matter to us.
And we give it all back in that case.
Yeah. So it's still the gas, it's the fee divided by the gas wanted, which decides, okay, do you win the auction or not?
Interesting. Okay, so regardless, it'll always have to be a bundle transaction, and that bundle is how if an auction is not won, the fee just never goes through because that send message never actually happens.
Right.
Yeah, we just disappear the transaction.
That's oddly elegant.
Yeah, and we thought about it a lot. It seemed actually relatively elegant.
I'm glad we could have this after show to talk about the same stuff we were talking about before the end.
Yeah, whatever happened to the damn show format, man?
Yeah, I was gonna ask a question unrelated to.
Quickly,
Barry wants to answer Rama's question.
where was it?
What was it? Which one?
Stop answering questions.
No, I just felt bad. He sent so many messages and he got ignored. Oh, it was the soy question. So is it a centralization risk if not all validators have access to Skip? So we generally, everybody can still submit transactions through the normal means, normal RPCs, whatever. So we're not eliminating any routes for getting transactions into the network. We're just introducing a new one, sort of like you have an express highway on a lot of American highways.
HOV lane.
And we're also decentralizing, thank you. And we're also decentralizing the kinds of clients people are running. So there's going to be some validators running Mev Tendermint. There are going to be some who, for many reasons, don't want to run Mev Tendermint, running normal Tendermint, which we think is good for network health as well. And we're never going to like tell a validator you can't use Skip at the start of our relationship with them. If we notice and our community of traders notices that a validator is receiving bundles from Skip and then not actually putting them in the block and front running them with their own transactions, then we will police that validator and remove them from our network, but they're free to use some other provider, some other auction provider as well. So we don't really view this as a centralization risk right now. I think the big research question for us is interesting is how do we make sure that we can expose the auction in certain ways to people that make it auditable, that allow the chain to know we're doing good revenue maximizing things without undermining like real-time trader privacy. So that's an area of research, but we don't view it as centralizing.
Yeah. And the other thing is like, it's not up to us if a validator joins Skip, right? Like as a validator, you get to decide if you join Skip or not. So, if you basically implement if you run Mev Tendermint, you're automatically basically able to receive things from Skip. And, if you basically add us as like a peer, we will do that, right? We will send you bundles. So, it's not like we police who joins and who doesn't, unless it's in the case that and we would probably do this through governance. We say like, hey, this validator is clearly just taking advantage of Skip and the people submitting transactions through it for their own benefit and front running all of them on their own validator. Does the community want this, or should we stop them from receiving that?
So does that mean like those chains will actually produce two binaries? They'll produce a Mev Tendermint version and a regular Tendermint version? Is that what you're expecting, like from say and other types of chains you're talking to?
Yeah, so we expect so Mev Tendermint runs in conjunction with Tendermint. It doesn't break consensus at all,
Right.
because it only has this separate sort of bundling sidecar thing. So if you're a validator on any chain and you want to run Skip, all you do is when you compile your binary next, you just switch out the version of Tendermint in your go.mod for Mev Tendermint, and that's it.
What will the fee distribution look like? Will it be that validators that run Mev Tendermint, they will receive all share in their extra revenue received, or will it all be put into the fee module? And so every validator and every staker will gain the rewards as received by the fees gotten by Skip.
Right now, it goes into the fee module. It's just treated like any other transaction fee, which is something that could change, but that's sort of the V0 since it's simplest and feels most fair. But we could do things differently.
Yeah, I think V2 of Skip is basically we have more granular decisions about how either the validator or just the chain as a whole wants to split MEV rewards, maybe not even between just the validator and staker, but also other participants like IBC relayers or liquidity providers, all those different parties. So that could use a more customized fee module to do that.
Okay, I'll stop with my questions so that we can
right?
get back to the after party.
I love after party.
I'm just setting the messages. I'm like, this hasn't gone to plan.
You started it.
Well, yeah, you literally started it.
You hit the button.
I hit the button at the agreed time.
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
I want to know.
Can we come back to heat?
Okay.
No, go. You just.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious. You guys touched on what your background is as engineers. How did you get into this, and how did you start thinking about it?
Yeah, we both have different answers for that, of course. So for me, I got into crypto in 2016. I just graduated high school and I went out to San Francisco and I lived in the attic of an office. And at the time, I got started working on this company called Cent, later rebranded Valuables as a co-founder. They were a very early NFT marketplace before OpenSea. And we used we used Ethereum at the time, which had basically just come out, to basically like enable microtransactions. And then once it shifted to the NFT marketplace, they sort of had this moment of fame when they sold the Jack Dorsey tweet for like 2.8 million. That was, I don't know if you guys saw it in the news at one point, but yeah, that was sort of my introduction to crypto. I had stayed interested with it throughout my years in college. I'd started a couple other businesses, studying finance and then also computer science at University of Pennsylvania. And then worked a little bit at Bridgewater and then also at Atlassian. So I don't know, Noel, are you from Australia? It sounds like, yes. So Australian.
Yeah, it's like our only good company.
I was a product manager there working on Jira and Confluence, our two favorite products. Yeah, after that, basically Barry and I stayed in touch for a long time as friends from college and saw this opportunity. We got really excited about MEV because it seemed to be something totally new in blockchain, in that like you can't have this kind of crazy financial composability on, let's say, like NASDAQ or anything like that. And we also saw like the downsides of it, and that there was no good solution in the ecosystem that we were most interested in, which was Cosmos. So we went to this hacker house. We built out a version of it there with Jump and Terra at the time. We won that hacker house, and then after that, we initially came to validators expecting them to tell us to fuck off. Excuse my French. And instead, the response was very different. It was like, we've been looking for this for a while. We know about this opportunity. We know that there's no way of capturing it. We know the downsides of it. Like, let's figure out something good.
So I guess, so both of you have some of a kind of low level background, I guess, then having like done some of the like the HFT type stuff, right?
I used to do machine learning research to find like optimal bargaining strategy, like on eBay and various other online contexts.
Okay, I was going to ask if there was some link to online auctions, because obviously those types of like ad price bidding auctions are probably the most sophisticated auctions in the history of economics, right?
They're super interesting, and MEV auctions have a long way to come. So do those ones, honestly. But I used to do machine learning research related to that, and then I spent some time at a hedge fund that helping them basically start new businesses that took advantage of our trading expertise. So I was on this like venture studio team where we come up with ideas for new startups, and my job was like help build them for 6 to 12 months and then spin them out. And while I was there, Magnus and I started doing some MEV searching on the side in Ethereum, mostly like NFT arbing and sniping and weird shit like that. And it was very competitive. We made a good bit of money for a little bit and then just like got wiped out by the competition. It just kept ratcheting up on Ethereum. And then eventually we came to Cosmos and we realized nobody had even built the infrastructure yet to allow people to compete. And Magnus was talking to someone at a happy hour and they were like, yeah, Cosmos still has first come, first served mempools. And we were like, what the hell? Like they're so far behind.
Well, I was going to say on that, I'm a little bit unsure of the exact details, but one of the value props of Penumbra that, because it's obviously everything is encoded, it's all, private by default, you can't front run because you don't know what's in the other transactions.
Yeah. So Penumbra, they do a lot of pretty interesting things with MEV. Some of it is the encryption stuff, so you can't front run people easily. But there's still MEV that exists there, right? It's just, again, different dominant strategies. So instead of arbitrage opportunities being captured in the same block, it moves to the top of the next block. And Penumbra actually does some stuff to have validators try to capture them themselves. And their team is super sophisticated on a lot of this stuff. But again, MEV and chain design are like inexorably linked. And people shouldn't think of it as like, oh, we're going to design our chain to not have MEV. Just think of it as like, we're going to design our chain to have like MEV that benefits the user experience and benefits the financial stability of the chain, as opposed to potentially harming those things.
Yeah, we haven't seen a single method of like removing MEV as a question. None of these methods like remove MEV. it's not removable. I think like even in the case where you like, you know, in the case of Penumbra, they do their own MEV and they just sort of wrap up arbitrage. But even in that case, like these assets are multi-chain, right? So it's like you might wrap up all the arbitrages and get to a stable place within your chain on Penumbra and then maybe also Osmosis. But then at the end of that, Juno's mispriced, right? On both chains between the two. And so then you get to this question of, okay, now there's like cross-chain MEV. Now there's like some arbitrage opportunity there, which is actually part of our roadmap and sort of our larger plan is to get into that too, which I think it gets really interesting there.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So, just because my primary background is not, although I am a validator, my primary background is a developer. I'm kind of curious again, like if you're working in that kind of stuff, what languages are you working in?
Go. All Go. Everything's
All Go.
Go. Yeah.
No.
Probably
So no, I mean on chain I assumed Go because of Tendermint, right? But I mean like previously, like what's your language background? For the HFT stuff, I'm guessing it's just like C, right?
Yeah. That Rust is kind of taking over now. So it's like getting super popular. I think because it's actually quite a bit faster than maybe people realize. But a lot of my machine learning stuff was just Python. This Go stuff is new for both of us. But that's just like that's how it is. Cosmos is written in Go for now.
How do you enjoy Go?
I like it. I really like Go. I think it depends on what you like channels. No, but I think Go's great. It's got incredible support for like parallel computing and you know like multi-threaded computing that works so well for a distributed system. I think you know Rust is great too, and I think it takes over in the form of like type safety and stuff like that. I worked at Bridgewater. I worked in Scala, which is like a very strongly typed version of Java, and so it reminds me a little bit of that. But Go. I feel like it's got like C level or close to C level performance, but it has like Java like readability, which maybe is not saying a lot. But
yeah, I was gonna say the classic Scala soup problem, which is like the two Scala code bases I've ever worked on, just like. Oh, it's a bit over here. It's a bit functional over here. Nobody's really committed to understanding how they would design either.
That's how it works.
And you're just like yeah, as somebody who spent the majority of like before crypto working in functional, like pure either pure functional or Lisps, I'm like, at least Rust, it's like an ML family language, like versus Scala. I mean, you're kind of just like, yeah, there's kind of like a way the language is telling you how to do this. It's trying to optimize in the same way that say Haskell did. So it's like going, yeah, okay, you be lazy, use iterators, blah 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 blah. You'll get good performance. Just trust me and don't worry about how the borrow checker works. Like, just add those ampersands when Clippy tells you you're wrong and you need to add some ampersands. Just add that shit. Go make a coffee, deal with your, move on with your day.
The thing that is super crazy about working on Tendermint, though, is like you really see how it was kind of like a POC that shipped years ago and now just powers billions of dollars in Cosmos. Like there's all these, you're like going through it, there's all these comments, which is like, to do, like fix this, like not sure why it works, or like somebody look into this. And it's just like, oh, there's nobody did.
It's like, not sure how it works. Not sure why or how.
Well, there's loads of stuff like that in the SDK as well, isn't there? I mean, like we had the problem with the invariant checks, and a good Go developer was able to solve that in like one night of concerted programming, right? And that
it was
very been paid out.
It was so the invariant check fix. So just an update on that. Bounty paid. And I think it's now included in the SDK, Frey. But what was that, like 10 lines of code maybe?
No, it was more than that. It was like,
was it?
It was like, including tests and stuff, it was probably a couple hundred. Like good dollar value per line of code, given that Go is not a very terse language.
Yeah, and if this developer is looking for a job, please do let us know.
Apparently, this
Blaze-
guy's not
Blaze
interested
Aroni.
in working.
Talk.
He's like, no, sir, I'm just here to fix this thing, and I'll see you later.
I mean, if I made like $60,000 in a night of work, I'd probably take the rest of the year off as well. Like, I don't think I would come and work on Juno. That's for sure. Like,
Ouch.
well, no, but no, you like
Ouch.
if why like if you can do that and then go pick up some more bug bounties, why would you commit to working
Yeah, sure.
like on a more regular pattern with a team?
Especially when doing so might remove the bug bounties.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah,
if you're-
I don't want to
That's
work for you. I'll
that's white
fix all
hat,
the
right? Yeah.
bounties. I won't get paid.
I'm downstream.
Yeah, that makes sense actually.
yeah, it's back as soon as you look at the incentive mechanism, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, had not thought of that. Hey, Frey, do you actually use that keyboard for anything? Like, do you play the keyboard piano? Yeah.
It's actually a printout. It's just a piece of paper laying there.
Yeah, it's a mono synthesizer. Yes, I do use it.
Like regularly? Like it's front and center on your desk.
Yeah, like as in I was using it earlier today. Well, I mean, I don't just like go like, you know, just for fun. Like,
Do that.
but
Have to ask a question. Just
It's
Yeah, I
like
thought like the outro of the podcast.
every
Yeah,
key
if
is
only I
a
could
is a
find that one.
macro
You should.
plugged into his computer.
well, no, because as we've established, I use an ergonomic keyboard that I built myself.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I thought you mapped the 88 keys to your QWERTY keyboard. That's how you
No.
coded on the.
that would be
No?
sense.
I have a
Hey,
Yep.
so
hell of a
Ari
I built
RE
myself.
keyboards, Frey, I did actually see something recently that had a different kind of keyboard that has a key for every finger, right? But the keys are actually four-way switches, and the letters are like four ways. So it's only got that amount. It doesn't have like a shitload of keys. It's only got like, 10 or so keys. But they're all like you move them in different directions to make the letters, but you can move them all in the same, like you can move all of the letters that you need in a word, or most of them that you need in a word, at the same time, and the software will just interpret that word.
Wow.
Seems
Yeah.
borderline worthless for writing software.
That sounds like a company.
Yeah, I've seen some of those kind of keyboards, but there's a reason that there's not been lots of additional development in the space. Because
Well, the dude was typing with it, and it's incredibly fast to type with. But I don't know how he was like doing it with his brain. It could have just been bullshit.